Welcome. I'm Doris Wise Montrose, President of Children of Jewish Holocaust Survivors. Thank you for joining us tonight for a discussion of Jewish friars. When I recently read Vic Rosenthal's blog post, American Jews Don't Be Friars, I had not heard that word before. After reading the post, I understood Vic was discussing one of the biggest problems of the Jewish people, our own foolishness. A quote from an article I just today read describes the phenomenon exactly. We remained silent in the 30s, and look where it got us. We hoped rational people would see sense and refuse to believe that people were capable of evil. And where did that get us? Train rides straight to the gas chambers by real mass murderers. And there are those today who follow directly. It's amazing how you talk about the Holocaust and it's just so emotionally overcoming. Sorry. Huh?
Deep breath, they said.
And where did that get us? Train rides straight to the gas chambers by real mass murderers, and there are those today who follow directly in the footsteps of the Nazis and who state proudly that they want to see all Jews dead, all of Israel wiped off the face of the earth. The situation for the Jewish people is now as dangerous and as frightening as it was in 1939. To survive, we must support Israel. The Jewish people cannot be friars. We are honored to have tonight Vic as our speaker, Vic Rosenthal. Vic lived in Israel for 9 years during the 1980s and is returning for good next month. He has been blogging as Fresno Zionism and Abu Yehuda since 2006, writing about Israel, the Middle East, American Jews, and related topics. A fan of Jabotinsky and Begin, Vic believes in Jewish reliance, self-reliance, peace through strength and deterrence, and in paying attention to the lessons of history. He minces no words, and those words resonate with me and with the positions of our organization. I urge you to subscribe to his blog. Our gratitude, as always, to the Lux Sunset Boulevard Hotel and their wonderful staff for providing us with this venue for our events. I just want to mention one thing, because there's already been an interest. We are going to have a weapons training self-defense class. We're starting a blog. We're starting a part of this part of the organization called Jews Can Shoot, and our first and our Jews Can Shoot Straight. And our first class is September 7th, and watch for it. If you're interested, make sure that I have your email address. And it is for newbies, for people who are like afraid to pick up a gun. So Vic will take your questions following his presentation. Kindly turn off your cell phones and other electronic devices.
My own cell phone.
With great pleasure, I introduce to you Vic Rosenthal.
Thank you, Doris. Thank you so much for reminding me to turn off my own cell phone. Well, I can't tell you how pleased I am to be here. You know, the first time I visited Israel, I had a conversation that went something like this. Israeli said to me, "Al tieh friar." Don't be a what? A friar, you know, how can you not? It's English. I said, well, it's not exactly English. The word's roots are Germanic, entered the Hebrew language through Yiddish, but the concept is quintessentially Israeli. A friar is someone who gives away what is rightfully his by being too nice. Hurry up, take the parking space, don't be a friar. More strongly, it can mean a sucker or a dupe. What I want to talk about today is how so many American Jews are friars in the worst sense. They are being used, being made fools of, and it's important that they open their eyes and see this. Caroline Glick said recently that J Street is to Zionism what Jews for Jesus is to Judaism. Let me repeat that. This is a great line. J Street is to Zionism what Jews for Jesus is to Judaism. Did your hackles go up when I mentioned Jews for Jesus? Yeah. I bet they did. There is something infuriating about a group that pretends to be just another way to be Jewish in order to attract gullible Jews, especially young people, and then trick them into abandoning their faith. There is something infuriating about being made into a friar. J Street, says Glick, is like that. It presents itself as just another somewhat liberal Jewish organization, one that is both pro-Israel and pro-peace. The absurd implication of this, by the way, is that others like AIPAC or the government of Israel are anti-peace. But that is incorrect. J Street is neither pro-Israel nor pro-peace in any real sense. It is a deceptively packaged anti-Zionist organization. J Street, like Jews for Jesus, appeals to idealistic young people, but it lobbied for a UN Security Council resolution that condemned Israel, which even the Obama administration vetoed. It called for an immediate ceasefire on the first day of Operation Cast Lead in December 2008. Its reaction to the current conflict is to feel sorry for everyone, Israelis and Gaza residents alike, very much alike, like there's no difference, and urge the U.S. to press for a ceasefire regardless of the wishes of Israel's government. It lobbied against sanctions on Iran, approved of the various Hamas-Fatah deals, and opposed a congressional resolution to force the Palestinian Authority to stop incitement. It has had vicious anti-Zionist speakers at its conventions, but refused to hear liberal two-stater Alan Dershowitz because he is an unapologetic Zionist. I don't know if he's still a two-stater, by the way, just after reading what he wrote yesterday, but we'll see. Its lobbying record is closer to that of the Council on American Islamic Relations and the National Iranian-American Council than to AIPAC. And its message is that Israel's policies are the primary cause of the conflict and that Israel needs to be reined in by American pressure. It describes the opposition to it as right-wing extremism and refers to the democratically elected and centrist government of Israel as a hardline right-wing regime. J Street's oily Jeremy Ben-Ami lied about receiving funds from George Soros, and J Street's PAC, the only part of J Street that is required to divulge the sources of its funding, received contributions from a former president of the Arab American Institute, an attorney for the Saudi embassy, a Turkish producer, this one is great, of anti-Jewish and anti-American films, and a board member of the National Iranian-American Council. J Street says that these donors' motivation is that they all want peace. Well, maybe. But I am not sure we want peace on their terms. J Street is clearly not pro-Israel, and since its policies act to weaken Israel, it's not pro-peace either. And yet, many Jewish American friars support it. J Street claims, indeed, repeats over and over that it is pro-Israel, but its actions are the opposite, words versus actions. Recently, the 50 member groups of the Council of Presidents of major Jewish organizations voted to reject J Street's bid to join, but 17 friar groups, including all 4 associated with the Union for Reform Judaism, 3 of the 4 conservative groups, Hadassah, and the ADL voted for J Street. Yes, they did, Hadassah ladies. My wife returned all her pins. Now I want to talk about another case in which someone claims to be pro-Israel, but whose actions belie his words. Nobody talks more about being pro-Israel than President Obama. He has referred numerous times to his commitment to Israel's security and the unbreakable bonds between Israel and the United States, and yet he has surrounded himself with a team notable for their anti-Israel positions. One of the first things he did was he tried to appoint this guy, Chaz Freeman, to be head of the agency responsible for writing the National Intelligence Estimate that summarizes intelligence information for the president and others. Freeman, who is a paid Saudi operative, blames Israel for the ongoing conflict and believes that a conspiratorial Israeli lobby controls U.S. policy for Israel's advantage and against America's interest. In his Cairo speech soon after his inauguration, the president said, quote, "The Palestinians deserve a state," and directly compared their statelessness to the Jewish Holocaust. He supported the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, Israel's deadly enemy and Hamas's best friend, and cut off military aid when Abdel Fattah al-Sisi overthrew the Muslim Brotherhood, the same al-Sisi that today is Israel's ally in the war against Hamas. But his administration helped the Palestinian Authority find a technicality that allowed it to keep its U.S. funding when it brought the terrorist Hamas into its government. President Obama was the first U.S. president to declare that a peace agreement should be based on the 1949 armistice lines rather than the concept of Security Council Resolution 242 that all countries in the region should have secure and recognized boundaries. He and his team have obsessively, in the words of Israel's defense minister, Ya'alon, tried to force Israel into accepting a deal with the PLO that would be disastrous, a deal that the Palestinian leadership wouldn't and couldn't live up to, a deal that would certainly result in terrorist rocket launchers a few miles from Tel Aviv and even closer to Ben Gurion Airport. This despite the entry of Hamas into the Palestinian Authority, the jihadist threat to Jordan, the presence of ISIS jihadists in the Sinai, Iraq, and Syria, the danger from Hezbollah's tens of thousands of missiles, and last but assuredly not least, the nuclear threat from Iran. Recently, his administration forced Israel to release more than 100 terrorists, including mass murderers, in order to, quote, get the Palestinians to the table. Most of the terrorists were freed, but the negotiations, doomed by fundamental disagreements that everybody knew about long before, failed anyway. This week, the State Department issued an advisory against travel to Israel, which they just lifted, and the FAA banned U.S. Oh no, they didn't lift that. The FAA banned U.S. airlines from flying to Ben Gurion Airport. That was lifted. Although there has been no such ban on flights to the much more dangerous airports in Pakistan or even Kabul, Afghanistan. Israel's international airport is its lifeline to the outside world, and the ban, which triggered similar actions around the world, will have significant economic and psychological consequences if continued. And thank goodness it's not, thanks, I think, to the opposition in Congress, especially from Senator Cruz. Let's talk about Iran. There is good reason to believe that Israel was on the verge of bombing Iran's nuclear facilities in October 2012, but was told in no uncertain terms that the U.S. would not permit it right before the election, of course. Instead, the U.S. has allowed the Iranian regime to temporize while sanctions have been relaxed and Iran gets closer and closer to operational nuclear weapons. It may already be too late for Israel to safely destroy Iran's capability, and the U.S.-led negotiations, extended yet again, appear to be leading to a situation in which Iran will have a, quote, breakout capability, the ability to build a weapon in weeks without detection until it is too late. On at least 4 occasions, Israel bombed targets in Syria, where game-changing weapons were being transferred to Lebanon's Hezbollah, the most powerful terrorist group in the region, with whom Israel has already fought one war in 2006. Israel kept these attacks quiet so as not to force Bashar al-Assad, the dictator of Syria, into a confrontation. But in each case, Obama administration officials leaked details of the Israeli missions. It also leaked information about an Israeli plan to attack Iran via a base in Azerbaijan. These leaks were both embarrassing and dangerous for Israel. So why'd they do it? We don't know. The CIA, which is also subject to administration authority, announced last year that Israel was a, quote, key target for surveillance and, quote, offensive counterintelligence, along with China, Russia, Iran, Pakistan, and Cuba. Is this how to treat an ally? Taken together, these are not the actions of a friendly president or a friendly administration, and yet 78% of American Jews voted for Obama in 2008, and after his actions in his first term should have made it clear where he stood, this only dropped to about 70%. What friars we are. How did this happen? For an answer, we need to go back about 70 years. I was born in the United States during World War II, which means that I grew up in one of the most remarkable places and times, an environment in which a Jew did not have to worry about being murdered for the crime of being a Jew. It doesn't sound like much to today's American Jews, but this situation has been quite special in diaspora history. By the time I was 20, barriers to Jews in various occupations, quotas at universities, and real estate restrictions were virtually gone. A Jew in America could be an American and a Jew. The horror of the Holocaust stunned Americans like General Dwight Eisenhower, who saw death camps with his own eyes in 1945. This, they felt, was the natural outcome of Jew hatred, and they vehemently rejected it. Since then, traditional Jew hatred has been marginalized in America, along with other forms of racism and ethnic prejudice. It is simply not acceptable, at least in polite society. But something else took its place. In 1968, Yasser Arafat took over the PLO, an organization dedicated to ending Jewish sovereignty in the Middle East. Until then, the PLO's rhetoric was the usual throw the Jews into the sea variety, which, especially after the Holocaust, did not go over very well in the West. So Arafat sought out and received advice from the masters of propaganda at the Soviet KGB, and they told him to turn the story around. Instead of tens of millions of genocidal Arabs trying to destroy the tiny Jewish state, they told him to present the conflict as the struggle of a powerless indigenous third world people, the Palestinians, to be free of their colonial oppressors. David and Goliath switched identities. The fact that the father of Palestinian nationalism, Haj Amin al-Husseini, cooperated with Adolf Hitler was pushed into the background. Although this required a massive distortion of history. Suddenly, Arabs from Syria or Egypt who had been in Palestine for 1 or 2 generations had to be presented as the remnants of a millennia-old Palestinian civilization, and Jews who were hated and exterminated in Europe had to become European colonialists. It fit in perfectly with the decolonization movements throughout the world, the civil rights movement in the US, the perception of the Vietnam War as a colonial struggle, and the New Left's hatred of American imperialism. Later, the language of civil rights was invoked with the 1975 Zionism is Racism resolution at the UN, followed by the 2001 Durban Conference, in which Israel was accused of being an apartheid state and likened to South Africa. Ugly words with absolutely no connection to the truth about Israel, but by this time a large group of people were ready to believe almost anything negative about the Jewish state. And I have to say I was shocked when I guess it was 2008, Condoleezza Rice said something about how the Palestinians were just like the blacks in the American South. I was stunned to hear that. I mean, there's a really well-educated person, and she could believe something like that. It was just shocking. Today, we can observe the daily inversion of reality in social media, where Israel is constantly vilified for going to war to protect its people against a vicious and unprovoked attack, accused of targeting civilians when it takes steps that are unprecedented in the history of warfare to keep from harming them, and criticized for the unbalanced ratio of casualties when it has spent billions on missile defense and shelters while Hamas cynically uses its population as human shields. The degree of animus against Israel on the left became so great that it disconnected not only from the facts but also from logic. Israel is demonized, and every accusation against her is believed, just as medieval Jews were accused of poisoning wells and making matzot from Christian blood. A double standard is applied. Israel's every action in self-defense is subjected to intense scrutiny and criticism, while serious human rights violations committed by other countries, especially Muslim countries, are ignored. Finally, the state of Israel is delegitimized. Its enemies argue that its evil is so great that unlike any other country in the world, it should not even exist. And I like, at this point, to contrast Saudi Arabia, which was created in the 1920s by a military conquest, has no freedom of religion, no freedom of speech or press. Women are second-class citizens. Jews and Christians are not even permitted to live there. Barbaric punishments are handed out, including maiming for petty theft and death for adultery or homosexuality. Slavery was officially legal till 1967, but is still common. Saudi Arabia uses its wealth to subvert nations around the world, and 15 of the 19 9/11 hijackers were Saudis. Has anyone ever seriously suggested, as a co-founder of J Street did about Israel, that its creation was a mistake, that it should give Mecca and Medina back to the Hashemites? No. Okay, anyway, to get back to the three Ds, instead of hating the Jews, which is still taboo to some extent, at least in the US, the left hates, no less irrationally, the Jewish state. This is often presented as a disagreement with Israeli policy, but the 3 Ds, as they were called by Natan Sharansky, demonization, double standard, and delegitimization, give it away. This extreme, irrational hatred of Israel has been called the new anti-Semitism. And let me just say that I hate the word anti-Semitism. I try to never use it. I use the word Jew hatred. That's what it is. Anti-Semitism is a euphemism that was created by a Jew hater, and so, who needs it? Left-wing anti-Semitism has put, right, Jew hatred has put American Jews, never mind, has put American Jews between a rock and a hard place. Many Jewish immigrants found a place on the American left, especially in the labor movement. My own grandfather was secretary of his chapter, the ILGWU. Some went as far as joining the Communist Party, but almost all strongly supported FDR and the Democratic Party as allies in their struggle with the bosses, despite the fact that FDR did nothing to help the Jews fleeing the Nazis in the 1930s and did not go out of his way to interfere with Hitler's murder factories during the war. Like today, the Jewish establishment, then, led by Rabbi Stephen Wise, was more understanding of the needs of the political powers that be than those of the Jewish people. The immigrants' children and grandchildren were in the forefront of the civil rights and anti-Vietnam War movements and the student revolts of the 1960s. That's me. They grew up, had children of their own, and sent them to good colleges where they could major in ethnic studies and where academic freedom has come to mean political indoctrination. They read the New York Times, watch MSNBC, and listen to NPR. The expression liberal Jew became a tautology. The election of Barack Obama was a critical moment. How could Jews not support the first black president, whom many saw as the final triumph of the civil rights movement that they had supported so strongly? But the president is not a traditional liberal. Schooled by Edward Said, Rashid Khalidi, and the Reverend Jeremiah Wright, he is a man of the new left, influenced as well by that powerful current of black anti-Semitism or Jew hatred that it is politically incorrect to mention in liberal society. Despite the positive rhetoric demanded by the majority of Americans who still support Israel, the administration's actual policies have been remarkably unsympathetic and dangerous to the Jewish state. Liberal American Jews had to choose between their support for the president and their peoplehood, embodied by the Jewish state. Most, lulled into a sense of security by their safety and ease of assimilation in America, chose the former. Many have gone even farther, adopting the ideology of the extreme left, in which Israel is a perpetrator of evil, an apartheid, Nazi-like state, an oppressor of Palestinians, not a protector of Jews. J Street, and less subtly, more extreme organizations like Jewish Voice for Peace are there to help them internalize this. This subversion of American Jewish support for Israel has been one of the greatest accomplishments of the forces that want to deny the Jewish people their right to sovereignty in their homeland. And this is really important. The writer Peter Beinart has made a career out of saying that Israel's behavior has forced American Jews to choose between their liberalism and their Zionism. This is inaccurate. The truth is that liberalism has been replaced by viciously and irrationally anti-Zionist leftism, which is making new anti-Semites out of them. Most of us don't remember a time when there wasn't a state of Israel, when a Jew had no homeland and was physically and psychologically dependent on his non-Jewish hosts, when a Jew did not belong wherever he lived. Today, we find Jews like the 20-something daughter of New Israel Fund official Naomi Peiss saying that for her, Israel is just another country. Can you imagine going back to 1946 and trying to explain this to the Jewish refugees who were risking and often losing their lives to get into British-occupied Palestine? History tells us that it will not always be so easy to live in the diaspora. American society is changing rapidly, and the unique situation that has held since 1945 may not continue forever. It will not always be comfortable to be both an American and a Jew. If you want to see the future, look at our college campuses. Right here at UCLA, candidates for student government are being pressured to sign a pledge that they won't take a trip to Israel sponsored by Birthright or other pro-Israel organizations. Listen to the pro-Hamas demonstrations explicitly calling for genocide against Jews. And keep in mind that today's students are tomorrow's political and business leaders. Jews in Europe are already finding out yet again that they don't belong among those that had previously tolerated them, as anti-Jewish hate is expressed in beatings and murders. This time, though, they have a place to go and a country to defend them. There will not be another St. Louis or Struma. The existence of a strong Jewish state is essential to the continued existence of the Jewish people, and the support of the U.S., or at least the indifference of the U.S., is essential to the state. Unfortunately, American policy today is less pro-Israel than it has been at any time since 1948. I ask you to open your eyes, pay attention to actions, not words. Don't be friars. Don't let yourself become unwitting agents of a new incarnation of the old hatred that we have faced for thousands of years just because it falsely presents itself as progressive. Don't allow the liberal Jewish establishment to repeat the mistakes of the 1940s when it was seduced and co-opted by political power to betray the Jewish people. If we American Jews don't fight for our country to support Israel, who will? And if not now, when? I will take questions. I just want to say one other thing. When Doris introduced me, she said that it's like 1939. There's one big difference between 1939 now and that is the state of Israel.
There's another question.
Yeah.
From a Holocaust survivor. He'll tell you.
Can I ask a question?
Of course.
Do you see any kind of a parallel between what's going on now and, let's say, in the 30s, the German Jews, who really subverted their own Judaism because they wanted to be more in tune with Germany itself? They were afraid of being marginalized if they were too strongly Jewish, so they made the Germans first, Jewish second. Do you see
I
kind
think
of a parallel between that mindset that goes on?
I think we've already passed that stage. I think that stage was, I think that my parents' generation was already doing that, and I'm pretty old, so I think that they were doing that in the 40s and 50s and trying to be Americans. And I think that my generation and my kids' generation, they don't even, I mean, now I'm only talking about non-Orthodox Jews. The Orthodox Jews are totally different. But the liberal Jews, they don't even really understand, there just isn't even a tension there. They're just Americans of the Jewish faith. I mean, they're not even trying to do that anymore. Their parents did it for them. Yes.
My husband and I attended the rally for Israel that was on Moshe Boulevard a couple of weeks ago. And my first comment is that to see the Palestinian supporters there, it was absolutely chilling. But I noticed that where were all the rabbis? It used to be that years ago, when there was something to support Israel, some kind of a crisis, all the rabbis and their congregations showed up to support Israel, and they just weren't there. There was one, Rabbi Wolpe was there, I think it was pretty much.
He's the
The
worst.
ADL sent out a warning that they shouldn't do it and that
Oh,
they
they're
shouldn't.
disgusting.
Yeah,
Yes.
We have 33 United States congressmen and senators today for the Jewish faith. How many of them are Republicans?
I think 32 or 33.
None.
No,
None.
not one.
Republican?
Not one. There was one,
Oh, you're talking about the
United States
the United
Congress.
States Congress. We have congressmen and senators.
they're all Democrats.
33.
Right.
One of them is
Amazing.
Republican.
That's right,
Cantor.
Eric Cantor, and he's
He's
gone.
gone.
No, you're right.
You preaching to the choir here, sir. What do
Yeah.
you do about the Spielbergs? What do you do about the Weinsteins? Well, what would you do about these guys that are giving millions of dollars every time you turn around to Obama? Where are they? What, here
What do you do
have-
about
You
them?
have peer supporters. You know you talk to them. How do you reach the people that they're going to vote for Hillary before you turn around?
Right. Yeah, I was just thinking about that. You know, I think Jews have sort of learned that Obama is not the guy, but they're
No, they
all
haven't.
ready to go for Hillary. Think not?
Not true.
We went, as I said, from 78 to 70%. I wonder if he, you know, if he were running yet again, how far down it would go.
69.
Nothing.
He was at Cantor's Deli today.
They'll still vote for him.
Yes.
The radio was full.
Wait, everyone. Let's let the lady.
As a member of APAC, and I've attended their, conventions. Hold on. One of the things that happens with APAC, it's okay, my voice is loud enough.
No, it isn't.
Somebody in here, no. Okay, all right, okay. As a member of APAC and as an attendant, and I'm sure there may be other people here, one of the problems that I see is that APAC tries to maintain a position, even though I support them. They try to maintain a position that we can't criticize the president. And what has happened is that this organization has become sort of like, how can I say, they're trying to straddle, straddle. You know, we can't be anti-Obama, we just have to support our president no matter what. One of my very good friends who got me to go to APAC, when I tried to criticize anything, she says, you can't criticize the president, he's our president.
Well, I can tell you what they're
Wait,
thinking.
One more thing. And also, she says that because of him, we have the Iron Dome, that he, you know, so how do you answer? I know it's hard work, but how do you answer that when you have somebody who's, you know, she's pro-Israel, but
Well, I'll tell you what they're thinking. Okay, they're thinking they don't want to make it a partisan issue. They don't want it to be the case that if you're a Republican, then you're for Israel, and if you're a Democrat, you're against Israel. That's what they're thinking. Is that the best strategy? Honestly, I don't know. I don't really understand what there is about being conservative that makes people pro-Israel, and I think that, but I do understand what there is about being liberal or left-wing that makes you anti-Israel, which is that people are just prepared to believe what they're told, and this is the line that they get from their leadership, and they don't think about it. They just don't think, and they just mouth the same junk that they hear. In the back.
I have a question.
Wait,
Oh.
I'm gonna take over, I'm just.
Okay, so you're going to pick people? Okay,
Because
go ahead.
I just wondered what happened to Israeli high-tech knowledge and all of that strong here. What happened to these tunnels? They didn't build them overnight. Why didn't they detect them earlier?
That
Good
after this war is over, and after the tunnels are destroyed, and after a lot of people have been hurt and possibly killed in the process, then I expect some heads will probably roll, because this was something they should have dealt with and they didn't. And there is another problem waiting in the future, which is the same thing up on the northern border with Hezbollah.
Right
Well,
here.
Wait, I'm letting Doris pick people to answer.
Just 2 points. One is about the tunnels that just came up. What I'm reading in the pro-Israeli press is that those tunnels are concrete, and it's extremely thick concrete. So they can't, there's no real way to see anything inside of them, but you may wish to speak to that. The other point I wanted to talk to about was AIPAC, because I'm a member of AIPAC too, and a strong supporter, and I've been to the meetings and I go to the meetings. But the point about AIPAC is we're asked not to criticize Obama, for example, when he's there as our guest. AIPAC does criticize Obama through the congressmen that they need support of. So they'll go to Democrats and Republicans, and that's why they can't take sides.
Okay, well, I'll speak first of all to the thing about the tunnels. It's not that the concrete is thick or anything. It's that the tunnels are very deep, very deeply dug, and they're very hard to detect for that reason. If they knew exactly where the tunnel was, they could probably bomb it from the air, but they don't. And also, the tunnel entrances are located in very heavily populated areas in Gaza, and they are trying to avoid civilian casualties, whether you think that's a good thing or not.
They didn't build it overnight.
No, that
It
is
was so
correct.
sophisticated and
Well, that's why I say,
Supposed to have good
They should.
intelligence.
right. Now they have some pretty good intelligence. They today captured, I don't remember how many, a large number, like I think 150 Hamasniks, and they are telling them what they know. And so that will improve the intelligence situation.
You know,
Just one, I'll come over there, I'll come over.
I'd like to, first of all, thank Keith Wright for inviting my husband and myself. David and I are visiting Israel.
Can't hear you.
We can't hear you.
Sorry. David and I are visiting.
Speak up.
We live in Jerusalem, and we made Aliyah in 1997. So, on this topic of the tunnels, it's a long story, but to make it really short, to address the issue of the tunnels, I worked with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and went on the March of the Living, by the way, in the year 2000. And Shabak, which is the Secret Service inside the State of Israel, knew about these tunnels for many, many years. They're not stupid. One of my best, I teach English as a second language, and among other things, since I made Aliyah, and our son was in the Army for 3 years in search and rescue, in a special unit within search and rescue called ABACH, which is Atomic Biological Chemical Warfare. So he has many friends who are in the Army, and we're in this special unit called Duvdevan, which means cherry. It's the pick of the high intelligence units. They have unbelievable on the ground intelligence in Israel. We don't want to know about all the terrorist attacks they avert on an hourly basis. And I'm not exaggerating when I say hourly basis. One of my best students, English students, works for Interpol in the Signal Intelligence Division of Interpol. And they know what's going on. It's just, as I'm sure you are all aware of, I'm preaching to the choir here, that everything is politicized these days. And if you're a foot soldier and you know what your job is, and this goes back to Ariel Sharon and what happened in the disengagement, or let's say expulsion, in 2005, you know, our own people expelled our own people. And that left a huge vacuum. And what did we think was going to happen? I mean, come on, Hamastan has happened. And it's no surprise. And they knew about these tunnels for years. But for Israel to just act and just say, oh, we're going into Gaza now, we threw our own people out, and now we have all these terrorists, surprise, surprise, and we have 10,000 missiles raining down over Sderot for 10 years, and now suddenly we're going into Gaza and we're going to just clean up the tunnels. Well, you can't do that, politically speaking. On the ground, militarily and strategically, Israel is in an amazing position right now. They're better off than they've ever been. They're very, very highly prepared. They were not prepared in 2006. It was a nightmare what happened when Olmert was the prime minister. It was horrendous in July to send these guys in just southern Lebanon in the hot summer months. They didn't have flak jackets. They didn't have canteens, water. They didn't have rations. It was a horrible situation. And they've learned. The military, I'm speaking of. They are very prepared. The young men who are going into battle now in Gaza, it's a very beautiful thing that's happening. It started in Lebanon. Chabad actually has a kind of a mobile van, and they go around, and the big thing is, for all these guys, they're not religious at all, and they are wrapping tefillin, just for good luck. You know, it's a beautiful thing, and so back to these tunnels, Israel knew about these tunnels, Shabbat knew. They can't say that they knew, though. Well, what we believe actually has started this whole latest incursion is obviously, as we all know, the 3 boys who were abducted and murdered. And one thing led to another, and they realized, hey, this is our opportunity. We're in here now. We got to find out who killed these boys. And oh, by the way, there are these tunnels here. Surprise, surprise. Gee, we found these tunnels. Well, they knew these tunnels were there already. But they couldn't go in and clean house because of the political situation worldwide. And because, I mean, I'm sure you guys know the current leadership in the White House, what's going on here. We don't have any support for Israel. We really don't. I mean, they have to say they're supporting Israel, but the guy at the helm does not support Israel. And anyway, that's a whole other topic. But the thing about the tunnels, they knew. They've known for years.
Okay.
You should go around speaking to lots of people. You're doing that. I'm gonna move to the front row, but I'll come to everybody. You can stand in the hotel, so get every year all night, right?
I just want to add
Right.
one thing
Answer the question.
about the tunnels. I went to a lecture, I don't know, 2 or 3 years ago from the Technion, and they have the technology now and probably had it about 5 years, maybe not in 2006 or before, but they have the technology to know when a tunnel is being dug. They know that it's not an animal burrowing, and they know that it's people burrowing. But when some of these tunnels were dug, they didn't have this technology.
Well, there's a huge amount of area that has to be covered, and the tunnels some of them are very deep. They're as deep as 25 meters, which is seriously deep. And so they would have to have sensors in appropriate places to hear it. Now, recently I've been reading that people in the kibbutzim say that their kids hear the sounds of digging and talking and all this stuff. There's been in the past year or so, they've really gone. The Arabs have increased the work on the tunnels, and they do take a long time to dig. But I think the problem still remains that nothing really happened with respect to tunnels until there was almost a mass casualty incursion. When those several soldiers were wounded and they killed a bunch of Arabs coming out of a tunnel. So, go ahead.
I had received emails the past few days, and some of them said that there were many more tunnels than the Israelis were aware of, and some, the Americans claimed that they had located tunnels through whatever equipment, I don't know, that the Israelis did not know about. But it does appear in any case there are a lot more tunnels they're finding out now than they originally thought had existed.
I haven't heard that, but well, yes, there are more than they thought. I haven't heard what you just said. I did hear, and so far there's no real good source for this, but there's sort of a rumor going around that there was a massive terror attack being planned for around the period of the holidays. But again, that's a rumor, and there's no definitive source. Hmm? Yeah, but whether it's true, we don't know at this point. I'm sure they're getting a lot out of those people they capture.
Could you explain the nature of the financial support that comes from the U.S. to Israel? Does Israel need the U.S.? Could Israel
I don't
turn
think
to
so.
China for?
Well,
could Israel operate independently?
Okay, there are a lot of issues here. First of all, there's the question, all of Israel's aircraft, for example, are American. So there's the question of spare parts and so forth. Now,
is that still the case? Because I hear, well, we make our own spare parts.
Well, I'm sure they do make a lot of spare parts, but I'm sure there are also some that have to come from America. Israel does not really get all that much, doesn't get direct aid. It gets military hardware that many people look at as basically aid for American defense contractors. I think that there's some number like 1% of Israel's defense budget is American, comes from the American aid. In the case of the Iron Dome, we got a lot of money for that, but I think Israel could do without it? Yes. Israel could tell America that we don't want the money. Whether Israel could tell America, we don't, we're going over and we're gonna be China's ally and not yours, I don't know if they could get away with that.
Why not?
Well, because of
what are the consequences?
Well, here's this. There are a lot of different things. We saw a little bit of it when Obama decided to ratchet up the pressure on Israel to agree to some kind of ceasefire by trying to close the airport. But there are a lot of things that the United States can do. It can be very nasty. So, Bibi is really walking a tightrope trying to I'm sure it's much more complicated than I think.
But Obama's ignoring China now. He's ignoring the Far East. He's ignoring everybody. So it gives Israel the opportunity to move.
Well, I think Israel is trying there now. There are various initiatives to open up trade and technological cooperation with China and other countries. So Israel is doing that as much as it can. I think one of the most important developments that hasn't really had a big effect yet, but is going to, is the discovery of large natural gas reservoirs, one of which is now operating, and the really big one is not yet.
Where are these natural gas resources?
What?
Where are they?
They're in the Mediterranean, the eastern Mediterranean near Israel. Cyprus has some, Israel has some, I guess Lebanon has some. But it's really going to change things because if Israel can sell its natural gas to Europe, and you know, that will generate you know, a certain amount of you know, a lot of these. Well, if you look at what's coming out of Egypt now, the type of, all of a sudden you hear from all kinds of Egyptians. There's all these YouTubes. There's a YouTube of the Egyptian doctor or something talking about how wonderful Israel is, and you know, it's just like upside down. All of a sudden, Egypt is talking about how Hamas are terrorists and so forth. And you know, there's a reason for that, because that's what al-Sisi wants. And when Israel starts selling its gas to Europe and to other places, then they're going to all of a sudden see things a little differently.
There's been some, I think, some public opinion polls among the Palestinians recently, I think, that showed that overwhelming support for Hamas over the PLO or PA. And another, I think of that in terms of, there's also a long article in the New Republic that supposedly gives the inside story of the struggle over the last year by the administration and by Secretary Kerry to get Abbas to sign on to a peace agreement. So, you know, this rings bells in my mind. What do you call someone who's working really hard to get somebody to work with him when that person has no support among his own people?
Well, yeah, you know, the problem is that the PA, basically, it has support from their, you know, the Palestinians are organized into clans and families, and that's really what's important to them. And there are certain clans that support Hamas and certain clans that support the PLO, support Fatah. I think that whenever there's sort of, when you ask Palestinians what they think, the ones that are the most radical, the most anti-Israel, the most aggressive in their speech, they're the ones that are going to get the highest ratings from the Palestinians. Does that really mean that that's who they support? Not necessarily. But Abbas really is nobody. Abbas is American and European money and the IDF protecting him from Hamas. So making a deal with him is pointless.
Quick point of information for everybody here. I fought the war of 48, and the saddest day of my life was when the old city fell. Till 1967, we were not allowed to even come close to the Western Wall.
Right.
We used to go to a mitzpeh and
Right.
look at it down, waiting in lines for a few minutes so we can look at it. Going back to the pre-67 is criminal. It's impossible. That's one point. Second point, let's not discount the support that we have here from the evangelical Christians.
Yes.
I happen to have some very close personal friends. And he took me on one-to-one and said to me, when Sharon gave back, he says to me, God said you don't give your land for peace. God said that. Why are you going against the word of God? They are your biggest supporter. If you happen to listen to Huckabee on Saturday night, he's been 27 times to Israel. You'll never find a better friend than an evangelist.
Right. Now, I need to tell you something that you probably won't be happy to hear. That is true. That is true, and that the evangelicals have supported Israel very strongly. There is a really powerful movement now, especially among acting on the younger evangelicals, that is anti-Israel. It's based on an appeal to solidarity with Palestinian Christians. It's based on a theology that's different from the, a form of replacement theology. In other words, saying that, well, you know, now we're the people of Israel, not those Jews. There are a lot of, they are working very, very hard to sabotage the support of the evangelicals for Israel. And let's see, trying to think of who wrote, there's a big article that I just read about this. I think that's where I read it.
Commentary.
Was it Van Zyl? Does anybody remember who wrote this?
I don't remember, but it's in commentary.
Well, it would be the kind of thing that you would write.
Yeah. Well, okay, can I call on someone? No, you're calling on, okay.
I'm going to come up with a question, but I do want to say that there are some blessings that I see. The first is that our president has unwittingly done a remarkable job of uniting the people of Israel as never before. I think that's blessing number one.
Right.
Blessing number two is that unlike a number of years ago, the group of Prime Minister Netanyahu, Ya'alon, the Minister of Defense, and Benny Gantz is a very effective
Right.
trio, and the strange set of circumstances that now make Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Egypt this
Correct.
week, or today and this moment, on the side of Israel, and Syria fighting amongst himself, and even Boko Haram has tied up the Iranians, and the president, when he is not fundraising and golfing, and I wish him a lot of golf rounds, he's tied up with the Russians. So there's a lot of blessings. My question is this. You didn't like the word anti-Semite. I can accept that. And I reserve the word anti-Semite for all of Europe, anti-Jewish and all of left, and that's the word. But my question is, should we, Rush Limbaugh on Tuesday got to talking about Israel, and he in his mimicable way, all of a sudden, Hamas, Hezbollah, Iran, these are modern day Nazis. And it would tactically not be better to label these people who want to destroy the Jewish people, annihilate them, and conquer the world as what they are, which is Nazis.
Well, that's, I heard somebody's Seva dome go off just now. You know, I wouldn't say that because I wouldn't want to, I mean, it's more complicated than that. But they clearly, there's more Jew hatred now, explicit and open and, you know, right out there than there's been in a long time. There's no doubt about it. And, you know, Israel's sort of a focus for it. You know, I think that Golda Meir was attributed to her, that Israel is the Jew among nations, that statement. And so that's really where they're coming from. Who's next?
Actually, the Christians, more than the Jews, understand that from the Quran that the Muslims hate the Christians as much as the Jews. And they understand that, and what gets me very upset is that the Jews, everything is Jews, and they don't align themselves with the Christians, which happen to be 1,200,000,000 people in the world. We're 14 million. And I've even spoken to people, you know, that work on the campuses, you know, where there's anti-Semitism, and I say, why don't the Jews on the campuses get together with the Christians? And the Jews don't want to do it. They really don't.
They're one of the there's an absolutely horrible website called Jews on First, which is dedicated to attacking Christian Zionism and the evangelicals that support. You would think, reading that website, you would think that John Hagee is more of a threat to Jews than, you know, the Iranians or something. And that's unfortunate. You know, there's a lot of suspicion of Christians from Jews. Some of it is just, you know, comes down from history. You know, obviously in the Middle Ages and the Christian-Jewish relations were not too good in Europe especially. But, you know, we do have to understand that today we are facing a common enemy. And the few million Jews are not going to stand up against 1.5 billion Muslims without help.
I want to make a few different points if I may, just real quickly. First of all,
Talk closer to the mic. I'm not hearing you.
Is this okay?
Yeah.
So first of all, back in here, I didn't see it, but someone made a comment that today's groups, terrorist groups, are modern day Nazis, and your comment was it's more complicated than that. I'm not so sure it is, to tell you the truth, and maybe you want to elaborate on. We're here for a lecture. Tell us why it is so much more
Well,
complicated.
one reason it's more complicated is that today's Islamist terrorists are driven by religion, and the Nazis basically
in fact, they're worse than Nazis because they have theological underpinnings.
well, okay, they're worse than
Anyway,
Nazis,
that's-
but they're
that's
different.
another
I mean,
point.
you have all kinds of people out there. Yeah, go ahead.
My other point, just I wanted to comment on an article that was in today's Jerusalem Post by a gentleman named Martin Sherman, who was our guest of about a year or so. Will be definitely come because he was great. And Martin Sherman talked about a few different things. I'll just say one comment about the tunnels because he made a comment about the tunnels. And his comment was one of tying it into people's thought processes, in particular the leaders of Israel and their thought processes. And he said one of two things. Either the leaders of Israel knew that there were a substantial amount of tunnels, and the problem is what the problem is, or the people of Israel, the leaders of Israel didn't know. If they knew, that's in
Very
itself
Talmudic
problematic
reasoning.
because they didn't deal with the issue. And if they didn't know, it's also problematic because they didn't deal with the issue either way. But ultimately Martin's whole underpinning and his approach is that people need to change their mindsets. And one of the reasons we're here today is to hear you talk about how Jews are suckers and how we're going to be able to change the mindsets, hopefully, of some of the Jews who are otherwise not in this room. So that's another question I have for you. What do you propose?
Boy, I'll tell you, well, I know what I've tried to say to them. You know, I say, well, you know, do you believe that women should be treated as, you know, first-class citizens like, you know, or do you believe that women should be subjugated and so forth? And they always say, well, of course, you know, it's very important to treat women like people. Okay, and then I say, well, you know, should it be legal to be a homosexual? Can a person be gay? Of course. I mean, and, you know, all this stuff. And then I say, well, how come you are supporting the Hamas and people like that, you know, oppose every one of your liberal values? I mean, do you believe in democracy, that in actually, you know, electing your leaders, and do you believe in a rule of law, and do you believe, you know, all this stuff that they don't have, that the Islamists want to replace with 7th century theocracy? And, well, I mean, you can say that. I don't know if it works. Maybe it makes them think a little bit. You know, there's this whole colonization, third world, post-colonialism thing. They divide the world into two classes. There are the colonizers and the colonized. And if you're a colonizer, you're like European and you're northern and you're technologically advanced and you're white. And if you're a colonized, you're probably darker skinned, southern, and Muslim, whatever. And the colonizers exploit the colonized, which means that the colonized then have a right to do whatever is necessary to overthrow this oppression. And so the Palestinians are justified in using terrorism and other kinds of things that are not allowed for Western people to behave that way. And also their failings in the areas of human rights and democracy and stuff are accepted because, you know, they've been colonized, so we screwed them up. And it's actually, I mean, I read an article about honor killings and stuff. Well, you know, why do they do that? Well, it's because of the occupation. What? It's because, you know, we have supposedly, because of the way we oppress the Palestinian male, he can't you know, express himself as a male. The only target he has is the women. So he, you know, so his honor is so, because we've taken his honor away, he has to get it back by, you know, murdering his sister because she, you know, talked to some guy or something.
Okay, I never met you before, and I've worked in the Jewish community for 20 years. I'm glad I'm here today to hear you. But this wonderful gentleman that fought against the Arabs many, many years ago, and you said you were in the Holocaust? Yeah. Okay. He asked you a question, and I don't think you answered it, and I need to hear an answer. Have you ever gone to someone like the caliber of a Spielberg or any of those people to talk to them? This gentleman said you're talking to the choir, okay? What have you done personally to try to talk to people with this wonderful speech who are not like us?
Well, I wouldn't give the same speech, I'll tell you that.
Did I do?
I'll tell you that. I wouldn't.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, well.
Just gave $1 million
Yeah.
to Obama.
Yeah, okay. What?
Um,
I know why you're questioning me. I worked 20 years raising $20 million to fight against anti-Semitism, so I don't appreciate that.
Okay, well, in any event, I've certainly done my best to talk to the people that I know. I mean, I don't really have entree to places like the White House or Spielberg's house or anything like that. But I know a lot of left-wing people, and I have done my best to talk to them. And I find
You
it
won an argument with them?
rarely. Once in a while. Let my wife speak. She says, I think she thinks she did. Did you win an argument?
Well, yes, actually.
Have you converted any of them?
I never talked to Spielberg. I never tried.
Here, come over here, microphone.
The Jewish temples, all my friends.
Oh,
that
yes.
live there
Okay.
belong to.
This is what I've been doing for the past 26 years.
Talk.
I was working in education at the Reform Temple. I was teaching the 9th graders the history of Zionism, the history of the modern state of Israel. And it was a little rocky in that community. They said, how come these kids keep, leaving Lisa's class and they go over to Israel and join the army? And some of those kids were friends, children of my friends. And it was a little bit difficult on the relationship. But I talked to who's listening. And one time Vic and I went to a seminar put on by the ADL when it really was the ADL up in San Francisco. And one of the most important things that I heard that day was a guy got up and he drew 3 circles on the blackboard.
Was Van Zyl?
I don't think it was Van Zyl.
All right.
Smart guy. And he said, these guys are never going to pay you any attention. They are set in their ways. Their whole sense of being is tied up in hating you. Forget it. Don't talk to them. It's a waste of breath. These guys are already your friends. They're you guys. It's really nice to be talking to you, and we agree with each other, and we have the same friends, and we have the same views and everything. But nothing is really going to change in the world for our having this conversation. These guys are who you have to talk to. And know that they already don't have a really strong view on Israel because it's not at the top of their priority. But you've got an in. And always think what you might say if you have the opportunity. Always be looking for the opportunity and think for what you might say and think of who they are and what's important to them and how you can get to them individually, one by one by one by one by one. And maybe you can make some difference. And if you know Spielberg, if you travel in those circles, that would probably be numerically more important than the people that I've been talking to in Fresno. But that's what you do. You talk to the people that are capable of listening but don't already agree with you.
And also, we've done or I should mostly say she's done, actually gone to churches and spoken to Christians about Israel, because Christians often really don't know much about, they don't have the facts. They may support Israel for religious reasons and, you know, for various reasons, but they don't know what's going on. They're not plugged into the media that Jewish people are. So we've done that.
I just want to say something. You know, this whole business about we're preaching to the choir, get the left, blah blah blah. First of all, I've been doing these events for 6 years. There is no sign out there that says no left allowed. Okay? So that's bullshit. Okay?
What's the point?
What's the point of what?
The left don't come.
The left don't come. You have to, you're not going to go to them. They're not going to let you in. So the point is that we have to be stronger so that when we are confronted on a one-on-one, we can say, we have something intelligent to say.
Have you ever won an argument with a liberal?
I don't know.
Tell me.
I don't know.
Never.
I don't know.
Anybody that voted for Obama, the Jewish face.
Okay, you know
Talk to
what?
them.
I have friends who have voted for Obama. They're not happy about it. You're not going to change
And
them.
they're still gonna vote for it.
Okay. Well, then what should we do? Go out and shoot them?
No, keep talking.
You're not believing. If they can't see what's happening, your talking isn't going to change their minds. Okay? The point of it is that we have to be stronger in our voice. Where Rick said that one. Stronger and louder and singing in tune. And then we will drown them out. But this whole thing about going over and talking to Spielberg, does anybody think that in all these years Spielberg is not aware of what's going on? And if he's not, then he's stupider than we think, and it's not going to make any difference. So don't focus on Spielberg.
That's not the way to win the war. Can I make a couple of comments?
Yeah, let's go.
I wasn't going to mention this. My question is actually different from what I wanted to state. In 2005, I was asked. In 2005, I was asked by my friends to remove Steven Spielberg from the stage, having produced the movie Munich, and I did a very successful paper that went all over the world.
Can't hear you.
Yeah, talk closer to the microphone.
Important and successful piece. In 2005 and 6, when Steven Spielberg did the movie Munich, it was so grossly inappropriate and inaccurate.
Absolutely.
And so I wrote a paper, about 5,000-word paper, that went all over the world, and what happened was he thought I was a survivor. It was very well written. So he thought I had lived through the Holocaust. He had no idea I'm a Roman Catholic girl who paid attention every day and didn't get drunk in college. And if you knew Jean Kirkpatrick, like I did as a young girl, you would understand what was happening. I had a good education. So when I published a paper, my friends who are Jewish said, gee, Katie, this would be really good if we could get Steven Spielberg to debate you. I said, oh, that would be my pleasure. And so they gave me Robert Kaufman as my debate partner.
Oh.
And Steven Spielberg studied my paper, and he couldn't hack it. He thought I was a survivor. He didn't know I was Catholic. And he didn't know I was blonde, you know. It was humiliating to have a Catholic girl.
A lot of us are blonde.
Well, but it would be humiliating to lose to someone like me. In his mind, not in my family. It would be humiliating for me to lose. So what happened was he sent his rabbi and his spokesperson from Citric, the very expensive public relations firm. The guy makes about $1 million a year.
Which rabbi?
From the University of Judaism.
Oh, yeah. You're one of the brother of the one from Skirball.
Yes. I can't remember his name, but he was a
Not
professor
important.
at Georgetown, and I had gone to Georgetown.
Well, it's not one of these.
No, his name will come to me, but anyway, the point is, it was a smackdown. It was a complete smackdown, because they knew nothing of history. They knew nothing. It was embarrassing that these people even were there to represent him. Anyway, and I didn't work that hard, but that's what we did. But anyway, my question really, so yes, Steven Spielberg does exist. He is afraid to debate publicly because apparently he didn't really pay attention in school or something. I don't know why he can't debate someone like me, but he couldn't. So
What was the
anyway,
result of that debate?
it was SmackDown news. It was.
No, I understand that.
We
And so
won.
as a result, the follow-up was,
The follow-up was that the fellow from Citric, who makes $1 million a year, so to speak, put his head in his hands because he knew they had lost, and the audience knew that history won. I didn't have to debate. I just
Right,
told
but I
him.
think that the gentleman is suggesting that then he went on to give $1 million to Obama anyway.
Yes. Well, we can't cure his we can't put a new head on him.
so what, but my question is, so what resulted from that event?
Zero.
Nothing.
Nothing.
In his mind, nothing. But he was humiliated. I mean, he couldn't even show up, and then he had to hear from his.
But what was gained
spokesperson.
from that?
A little bit of humiliation.
She tried.
I tried.
He gave her best shot.
You tried.
You gave your best shot. Great.
And I won the debate.
You know what? Do the same thing with Weinstein.
I would love to. But my question, really what I wanted to get to and we have to, we're, of course the Christians are the friends, the Christians are the close friend of Israel, of course. But the other thing that is very important to understand, it's not just when you say the enemy of the enemy, we're talking about the left. We're talking about academia. We're talking about the media. When there's not enough political power for Israel to correct the tunnels, that is when it's really a coalition of enemies. It's not just the Islamists. And we have the media. If you watch MSNBC and CNN, when you watch them debate, they're
Terrible.
It's terrible, but we have to understand that it's a coalition of people that are up against Israel. They're up against Christian too. It's just that there's 1.2 billion of us, and we're not afraid to debate Steven Spielberg.
You know, one quick thing. What amazes me about the Christian community today, right now, in Mosul,
Yes,
is the
they're-
oldest Christian community
Yes.
in the Middle East. They're killing them. They're burning their houses. What in the hell is the problem? What in the hell is the Christians?
They haven't had mass in that church in Mosul since June. They haven't had a Catholic
It's
mass.
absolute persecution against Christians to do nothing.
Exactly, it's the same idea.
Why don't
I just want to say something else, because I have the microphone. You know how many Holocaust survivors and children of Holocaust survivors voted for Obama?
No.
Many.
What?
I've
never seen one.
Wait.
I get emails
I can tell you.
every single day and messages on Facebook telling me that I don't represent all children of Holocaust survivors, that I should be ashamed of myself at the way, because we Jews are treating the Palestinians the same way the Nazis treated our parents.
Send them to
His
me.
father wasn't, I don't know.
Okay, go ahead.
His father was a big Zionist. Let me say something. I want to respond to some of the things that there are two big problems with talking to the left and trying. First of all, nobody is better at shutting people up than the left. I don't know how many times I've started talking and they shout me down, or I tried to produce a radio program and tried to get it on the NPR station. Fat chance. And stuff like that. Okay, that's one thing. The other thing is we have the phenomenon of ideological bubbles. Everybody, you people probably, you read certain things, you look at certain websites, you listen to certain radio stations, you watch certain things on TV, and the left has their things too. They listen to KPFA or whatever it is, KPF something else here in Los Angeles. They listen to NPR, which is horrible, just horrible. And everybody, and then we have conservatives, and they listen to Rush Limbaugh and Sean Hannity, and everybody
Dennis Prager.
hears. Okay, you have Dennis Prager, who's wonderful. You know, you'd think that if the leftists would just listen to Dennis Prager a little bit, they might learn something. The guy is brilliant, but they don't. And so everybody listens to what reinforces their own beliefs, and there's a psychological principle, which I forget what it's called, that actually they've done experiments that show that there's a certain actual pleasure mechanism in the brain that's activated by hearing people that think the way you do. And so it doesn't get out of our, it doesn't, if there's something important that we know, it's very hard to get it into the other bubble. So those are just two other problems in dealing with.
Well, you know what, I think that's a very good segue into what I want to say now. Because what you're talking about is actually looking at ourselves. And what I kind of hear this whole time, whether I'm liberal or not liberal, my parents were Holocaust survivors. I was born in Israel at a time when Israel was an amazing country in the 50s. That was the glory days of Israel. And I didn't change my name. My name is Tova, and I think that it's helped me in my life, and it's helped me to educate people because they ask me what kind of name that is, and I'm proud to say I'm Israeli and I'm Jewish. But I think we need to look at ourselves. What I've heard this entire evening is, what are they doing? What are the Palestinians doing? What are the Jew haters doing? What are the liberals doing? But what are we doing? We have to look at our part of it and how we can help and how we've hindered also.
Okay, so our part in connection with how we relate to the Palestinians, or is that what you mean? Or what? Be specific about how we can improve.
No, I'm not. You know how we can improve? By looking at ourselves and criticizing our own actions and what
We
do.
don't?
No, I haven't heard it once today.
Well,
Once tonight.
you certainly hear it
No, I'm
from
not joking.
Maybe Maybe not. No, tonight you haven't.
No, I haven't.
But, okay, so,
So, no,
well,
in
wait.
There's enough Jewish self-hatred in
Let's,
this world.
no. Look, let's be specific, okay? Let's get specific, because, I'm going to go off on a discussion of the Oslo syndrome, so if we're not careful. So why don't you tell me in what way what do we need to look for? I mean, we don't look at ourselves enough. I mean, the Army doesn't think enough about reducing civilian casualties.
Too much.
What exactly, what areas do we need to look
If
at?
you were to think, or you were to look at the Israelis and, so-called Palestinians, we're neighbors. It's just like any kind of relationship. What part do we have in this relationship? Might not be 50-50.
What are you talking about?
Wait,
What am I
wait,
talking
stop.
about?
Let her.
You don't look at yourself? You
Let
don't
her,
look at your
guys,
own
hey,
have a relationship
I would like,
when he wants to kill you.
all right,
You
everybody,
teach the children. They teach the kids since they were born. Go kill Jews. That's right. How are you going to talk to them?
okay, what I want to hear, listen, wait, everybody, allow,
Why liberals don't want to come, because you attack.
allow
I'm not a
her,
liberal, but you're attacking me.
I don't know what
You're
you're trying to
attacking,
say.
what I'm trying to say is that
let her speak at least one sentence. And I would like, okay, so I want to know, give me a specific example of an area that we need to look at and what we need to do.
okay, what we need to look at is when we say that this was initiated by those 3, Jewish children being murdered. What about that Palestinian boy that was slain?
Oh, please.
Okay, well, I can relate.
When it happened?
Go to your room.
But it's still happening.
I can relate to that. I can.
Excuse me?
Okay, there are some really serious, really big. There are some really big asymmetries in these two situations. Okay, the three Jewish children were kidnapped by members of Hamas who wanted to use them to trade for prisoners in Israeli jails. That is, at least as far as we can tell, that's the motivation, and they killed them for whatever reason. I'm not sure.
I'd like to answer.
Okay, wait a minute. Wait a minute. I get to talk too. All right. Now, the Arab boy. If you remember, after the 3 boys were kidnapped, the social media was full of Arabs making 3-finger salutes, 3 shalits, and we are just, and it was approved of by their government and party officials. It was approved of by the man in the street. Everybody thought it was great. Okay, now the Arab boy was taken by somebody who was obviously, as far as we can tell, he was what they call a hooligan, a gangster, a guy that was probably looking for an excuse to murder somebody because he liked to kill people. And here was an excuse. Those Arabs, let's get one. And he was denounced by every sector of Israeli society, by the government, by the police. Looked as hard for the killers of that boy as they've looked for anything in recent history. He was found, or they were found, and they're never going to get out of jail. And what a difference. How can you compare the two things? I mean, look, Israel is a country of 7 million Jews and I don't know how many, another 1.5 million or more Arabs. They're going to be murderers. They're going to be horrible people there. There's going to be awful stuff. But right, so big deal. Do you think you can have a country without a Jewish? You can have a country without a hooligan?
No. What did the Arabs do about the 3 boys that were killed? Nothing. They celebrated. The Jews right away went ahead and found the perpetrators and persecuted them. That's the little difference between savages and normal people.
I'm sorry.
My take is a little bit different because
Talk closer to the microphone.
she's
Lisa.
very highly regarded. My slant is a little bit different. As a psychohistorian who has been studying the Middle East for the past 15 to 20 years, from a psychoanalytic, psychodynamic perspective, we're always looking for root causes, and it may sound oversimplistic to many of you, but we've kind of nailed it down to the concept of envy. There isn't a day that doesn't go by that I don't get an email or read an article about the success of the Jews. The Jewish mother, there was a Freudian joke, a Jewish mother is running frantically along the beach screaming, "Help, help, my son the doctor is drowning." The Jews, as we all know, have become the most successful people in the world. The scientists, the neuroscientists, in the medical field, in art and entertainment. So I just wanted to make that point.
There's another point that's very important, which is about the nature of Arab society. Arab society, in which developed from a nomadic culture, in which honor was extremely important. There is an old story about an Arab, and he had like a bunch of sons and a huge number and a bunch of camels and a bunch of animals, and he had several wives and everything that he needed. And one day another Arab came along and took a goat or something, something very small. And the first man said, "Well, I should, go and hunt this guy down and get my goat back, but I have a lot of goats. It doesn't matter." Okay? And then the next thing that happened is they took maybe some cows and some camels. And then pretty soon, before he knew it, his wives were raped, his sons were killed, and they took his tent, and he was in the sand by himself. And the moral is, if you lose your honor, you lose everything. And the Palestinian Arabs believe and have been, and this belief has been very carefully nurtured and developed by people who want them to think this way, that the Jews took their land and took their honor, and they have to get their honor back. And the only way to get honor back is violently. You don't get your honor back by making a compromise. You don't sign a peace agreement and then they have their honor back. You get your honor back by killing them. And so it's the Arabs are difficult to deal with because of this. And let me just say that when Israel made the biggest mistake since 1948 that any Israeli ever did and brought Arafat back in 1993 from Tunis and let him set up his educational system where he developed an entire generation of people that are obsessed with killing Jews and getting their honor back. In a certain sense that, it's inescapable that we'd be in the situation that we're in today.
That's why it's called a shame, blame society.
Correct.
Revenge society.
Correct.
Vic, right here.
That's why it's called what?
Shame, blame, revenge, the sword society.
4 months ago, I had the opportunity to be at a reception honoring the new consulate from Berlin, from Germany, and gave a very, very moving talk to the audience. And his father was a Protestant pastor, anti-Nazi, so he had a very good background, not only in religious matters, theological matters, but successful in his own career. When the question and answer period came about, I posed the first question, and it was, what are any Christian groups in Germany doing about the present-day slaughter of Christians in the Middle East countries? He paused for half a minute, easily, and he thanked me for the question. And what came about is he knew of no activity on the behalf of his fellow Christians. So that tells us a great deal. And somebody posed the question, why don't we round up the Christian communities of the world to ally themselves because they're dhimmis, as we are. And all I can say is, in response to a few other questions of what we can do, I don't see any of our young people here tonight.
Thank you. Thank you.
I can keep going as long as anybody wants. People can leave if they want to. I mean, I'm not going anywhere.
I just want to ask you something you said earlier.
Closer to the microphone.
Excuse me. You had said earlier that there was one technicality that allowed the funding to go to the PA
Yes.
as before, even though Hamas is now
Right.
part of the government. Could you please explain what
Yes,
that
there is.
was?
Well, it's first of all there is the Congress passed a law, actually, that no money can be given to any Palestinian government if it includes Hamas. And there are a lot of other things that it says too, and it's very complicated, and the president gets to make exceptions under certain conditions, and blah, blah, blah. Okay, but it was pretty clear cut. And what they did was the State Department worked together with the Palestinian Authority, and they put together what they call a technocratic government, where they have a cabinet which is approved by everyone, including the Hamas, but the actual members sitting in the cabinet, none of them is officially a member of Hamas. They're technocrats. In other words, they're people that are concerned with practical matters and not political. Okay? So this was basically a fig leaf put on so that the United States could continue giving its whatever $500 million a year or whatever it gives to the Palestinian Authority, because the United States and Israel, to a certain extent, are afraid that the Palestinian Authority can be replaced with Hamas. But once Hamas is actually in the Palestinian Authority, it gets a little murky exactly. So, but that's what happened. I mean, they would have had. Now, when al-Sisi overthrew Morsi, overthrew the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, almost immediately they cut off military aid, because there is a law that says that we're not going to support military dictatorships. But rather than looking, but there were also other people that argued that they shouldn't for various reasons. But rather than look for a loophole, the administration pushed hard to cut off aid, because the administration supports the Muslim Brotherhood and does not support, and does support also Hamas. So apparently,
So right here, this one.
whoever has the mic.
I'll be brief, and I just want to address this to this lady, to tell her that A, we used to be liberals, and B, I have a few suggestions for you for books to read. The first one that I read was by Bat Yor. She's an Israeli, and she's terrific. And I sincerely hope that you read Brigitte Gabriel, Noni Darwish, Wafa Sultan, and so many of the Muslim women that have courage, that will show you what the Muslim society is really about, and it will help you. It will really help you.
They're all under death threats too.
Exactly. They're all under death threats.
We're going to make the last one.
Okay.
How do we attract young people to come to this?
That I can't answer. Talk closely.
My first, since we were just talking about Hamas being a terrorist organization, when does the PA stop being a terrorist organization?
No, well, the PA, it's interesting, you have to, there are all these initials and things like that. First of all, you have Hamas and Fatah, which are both terrorist organizations. Fatah is the organization that Yasser Arafat was one of the founders of. And, okay, now, the PLO is an umbrella organization of a number of terrorist groups, including, but Fatah, which is the leader of which is Mahmoud Abbas, is the biggest, most powerful member of the PLO. He's the leader of Fatah. He's Yasser Arafat's heir, and he's the leader of the PLO. And the PLO dominates the PA. The PA is the Palestinian Authority, which was created in 1993 by the Oslo Agreement to govern the Palestinians. So now, okay, you want to know who's a terrorist? Okay, well, Fatah has been killing, has actually, the PLO has killed more Israelis than any other terrorist organization, more than Hamas, more than Hezbollah. So they are probably, but somehow Abbas manages to say, well, I'm not really responsible for that side. You have these organizations like you have the Fatah, what do they call them?
The Tanzim?
Not the Tanzim anymore. They had them, but there's the no, that was then. That was 1972. The Al-Aqsa brigades now are, anyway, that these people who are part of Fatah have actually fired some rockets at Israel from Gaza, but they're associated with Fatah, and they're proving too that they, the only thing that plays with the Palestinian public is violent opposition to the Jews. And everybody has to prove that they're more aggressive in getting Arab honor back than everybody else. So yes, they're all terrorists, we are supporting terror. The United States is giving money to terrorists. They feel that these terrorists are better than the other terrorists.